Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast, where today we finish off our futures draft. Who is the next team up? How low are the Nets? Let's get into it now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Locked On Knicks, and we want to remind you that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today. And every day, we are available on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell if you want to see our smiling faces on a day-to-day basis. And hit your subscription button, of course, on your podcast platform of choice, so you always have us with you on the go. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can find them on all forms of social media at thestrict.land. Follow them just like Josh Hart does. And we are not talking about Josh Hart today. We are talking about almost every other team in the league. Our futures draft, an annual tradition like no other, just to give you an idea of like the landscape of the NBA, how we see it playing out over the next 5 years. And the beauty is in the comment, you get to call us geniuses, you get to call us idiots, you get to do it with my good friend, Marcus Barahal, who used to host the Locked On Nets podcast. It is a lot of fun, a lot of good jokes in this one. We had a blast, some interesting debates, some picks. Most of mine get ripped on, but that's okay. Enjoy it with us right now on Locked On Knicks. Marcus, despite the anonymous Twitter thread that you saw, I am going to go ahead and take the Houston Rockets. Obviously, I don't consider Jalen Green the face of the core. I think Alpi Şengün is the face of the core, and I think he's a little bit Jokic light. I think there's some blasphemous stuff going on where they were talking about Houston being better without him. They did find some stuff without him, and like that, I think the reason the Rockets don't go higher is because they have so much young talent, and it doesn't all fit together. And there's going to come a time where like they're going to have to like pick and choose between these guys. But the whole point is they have the privilege of picking and choosing. They're going to get a lot of picks back when they do trade some of those guys. They already have a lot of picks in they control. Some of the Suns' future, some of the Nets' future. I'm a big Amen Thompson guy. I think he is a total freak of nature if he puts it together. All NBA type ceiling for him. Reed Shepherd, probably the guy who would have gone number one post Summer League in a redraft. Maybe the Wizards still would have liked Sarr a little bit more, but really, really impressive Summer League. Just athletes across the board. Jabari Smith Jr. I'm still a big fan of his, so I'm really happy to get Houston here. And then I'm going to take another team with a ton of draft equity that will also leave me hated to Knicks fans, and that is the Utah Jazz. I consider just like taking a bet on like some better organizations like the Heat, like the Warriors, maybe even the Raptors. But like I don't think the present is good. They might try to tank this year, but they do have Lauri Markkanen signed up for 5 years, like who's a super efficient, like baseline. I'm willing to call him a star player at this point. And then they just have like a million picks, like the closest thing to Oklahoma City's pick equity out there, whether they maximize that, whether it all turns into good stuff. They have so many young players right now. There are a million questions, and they're like maybe one of the worst free agent destinations in the NBA. So there's a lot of stuff to figure out. But I think in terms of like just a baseline for success, they just have so much to trade and so much to work with. I would be pretty surprised if they're not like a 50-ish win type team, at least in years 4 and 5 of this. And maybe you could argue that's a little bit high to take them given that, but there just wasn't really another team on the board I liked. I was really hoping one of Indiana, New Orleans, or Cleveland got to me here. They didn't, so I'm going with the Jazz. But Marcus, did I mess up there? What do you think? Was I wrong to go against the Twitter thread?
The Rockets are the Jazz. That's like the first like real reach that I feel like I've seen. I mean, I know Markkanen is good and all. He's just like never going to be the best player. He's probably not going to be the second best player on like a great team. He can be the third best player, I think, but I just feel like they're really far away. And I know they have picks, but like you said, they're not really a team that is going to get free agents aside from like the Kyle Filipowskis of the world. And I know, Ainge is going to probably pull off some kind of miracle and they'll be, 40 and 42 before I know it. But I don't see high upside with them. Like from my vantage point, like the Mitchell Gobert team was like a real fluke that like is like the kind of thing that you're hoping for with all these picks. And that team, like made the second round. That feels like the kind of ceiling that like a Jazz team can have in my opinion. I know they made the finals in the 90s, but I don't know. Am I crazy, Alex?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm kind of right there. I look at this from the perspective of like, we're looking at the next 5 years, and I don't even know if I can squint and see them being a potential like dark horse anything within 5 years. It seems like they're still just in teardown mode. Like, it's kind of a joke that like they were even entertaining trading like Walker Kessler this offseason, a guy who's like been objectively good for them, and yet they've been kind of like jerking around, and it almost feels like are annoyed that he's as good as he is and is stopping them from losing too much, And like, I just low key even get that vibe with Markkanen, where it's like, okay, you found a gem, like you've got a young, like superstar type player that you could potentially start trying to aggressively build around with all this draft capital you've got from the Gobert trade, from the Mitchell trade, whatever. And yet it still seems like they're just like, they were listening to offers all summer because Ainge is still just desperate to line the coffers and like find a different star to build around. And it's like, I don't fully get it. I don't get the vision. Granted, I had some of the same critiques of Oklahoma City for a couple years too, where it kind of felt like they were just kind of sitting on their hands a little too much. But I just don't buy it with the Jazz, at least not for the next 5 years. I think they're going to have to like just luck into it. I mean, maybe it's this year. Maybe this is their end game this year, and they're like Cooper Flag or one of these like top guys in this draft class that's supposed to be super like loaded. This is like their end game here of like try to load up this year and then start going for it next year. I guess we'll only know over the course of the next year or so. That said, I'm going to probably make a really polarizing pick here with my next pick. And I'm looking at this purely from the perspective of what I said earlier, which is I think that if you pick a team in this thing and they win a championship, you automatically win on your pick. Like, I think that's a thing with an exercise like this. Like, you're looking for teams that could potentially win a championship in the next 5 years. The window is extremely short, extremely short. Almost.
You're about to snipe me.
I'm not taking the Suns. No, I'm actually taking the Lakers.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was looking at it, and I was trying to look at it objectively, and LeBron still has not gotten worse. I'm done betting on LeBron getting worse at any point in his career. That's thing one. I'm done trying to guess when that might happen. It's just not going to happen, period. AD is still in his prime. That I don't think that this core works necessarily, but they're less strapped than they used to be. I mean, we're now entering year 4 or 5 of the Anthony Davis era in LA. So they haven't really made any cataclysmic moves since then. And thus they're starting to get a little bit of flexibility back to make this team better. And if they want to try one more time to make a title team around LeBron, they could do it one more time. I think they've got one more shot at this. And if they make the right move, I don't know what that move will be, but they have tradable pieces. They have Rui making $17 million. They have D'Lo making almost $19 million. They have Vanderbilt at like $11 million. Like, you've got the pieces on this team salary wise to make something happen and make like one last ditch star trade. Some embattled star becomes available during the season. Take that one last shot and see if you can do it. And all it would take is for that to work, and then they win a championship, because LeBron obviously has championship DNA in him. Like, Anthony Davis is a phenomenal player. You need to bank on him being healthy, but stranger things have happened. Like, it could happen. This could be the year where he makes it all the way through. I don't know if I'm necessarily buying it, but over halfway through this exercise, I'm just taking LeBron. I'm saying, you know what? There's still a chance that he could win a championship. So that's why I feel all right with this one.
Marcus, was that your team, or who is it?
No, I was on the same page as you, Gav. I'm taking the Suns. And I think it's honestly like a lot of the same logic as what you were just saying, Alex, like just the talent, whether it's LeBron and AD or whether it's KD and Booker, and to a lesser extent Beal. Like, these guys are old, with the exception of Booker. Like, they're not going to be in our basketball watching lives for much longer. So definitely appreciate them while they're around. And as we saw in the Olympics, like, all 4 of those guys, LeBron, AD, Booker, and KD, were like out there in crunch time. Those are some of the best players that we have in the world. It's just that the teams around them are not great, and none of the 4 of them have really been consistently healthy or available or kind of like able to lift their teams beyond their own like individual stats. since probably like 2021, 2022. But I am going to take the Suns still. At a certain point, it feels a little bit insane to just keep thinking that like these KD super teams are going to work out. Like it's a little bit just the same thing over and over again. We saw it in Brooklyn. We've seen it now in Phoenix. And we saw it with like a couple different iterations, whether it was the KD Kyrie team, whether, you add Harden in, you get Ben Simmons in there, you get him with Booker and Chris Paul, and then let's try Beal. Like all these pieces are shifting around him. And as great as he is as an individual player, and as much as I do think he elevates teammates defensively, because I do think he's a very underrated defender, he's never been the kind of guy like I talked about that the Magic need, where he's like elevating his other teammates offensively. It's more done like by gravity. And that's kind of similar to how Booker plays too, where like it's a thing of I'm so good that people aren't going to look at you as much, you being my teammates. And so you guys can, fill those spaces and take up those opportunities when they come to you. But it's not the same as a guy like Luka or a guy like Jokic or a guy like LeBron, who's going to actively make his teammates better by getting them the ball, by putting them in positions to succeed, and not just saying like kind of almost like parasitically like ride the wave of like what I'm doing. So I don't think it really works. But that being said, it's a ton of talent in one place. It's hard to pass up at the 18th pick in our draft. Not even like a playoff team at this point if we were, cutting it off at 16. So I'll definitely take the Suns. And then with my other pick, this is where for me it's like kind of falls off a cliff. I'm going to take the Kings. I think they're fine. They're a little bit like post-hype this year because they had that great year 2 seasons ago where they kind of pushed the Warriors to 7 games. And they just like didn't really have the same gusto this year. I know they've got DeRozan now, so maybe that adds a little bit more life, at least in the short term. They feel a little bit kind of like what I was saying about the Cavs too, where they're kind of like trapped in that like mid to maybe high 40s win range. I don't honestly really see them breaking through, but I think they're a good team. They're a talented team. Fox is still young enough. Sabonis is still young enough that they can still improve and get better. Those two definitely have like a lot of chemistry together, and they've like stuck together for a few years now, which is not something you can say for a lot of teams. So they're definitely building a chemistry and rapport. And I just frankly don't love a lot of the options that are left. And with me taking the Kings, I think there's only 3 Western Conference teams left. And 8 Eastern Conference teams. So I don't know. Just want to get as many West tickets as I can at this point, I guess.
We wanted to remind you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. Me personally, I have a crippling fear of professional rejection. And sometimes it stops me from pursuing things that I really want to pursue and I think I'm good enough for. If you join me in that category of your own fear, it's important to acknowledge that sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place, because then you're just not living a full life and holding yourself back. That's why therapy can really help. Therapy has really helped me address some of my fears and concerns and drop out where they're irrational, and just kind of realizing that at the end of the day, you have less to lose than you think. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, get BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Yeah, it's definitely the conference of more parity at this point. Like I think the East is extremely top heavy, and the West, it's like you can squint your eyes and be like, something breaks right for a lot of these teams. Like they could potentially win a title. It would take for some more than others a lot more. But like I like the Kings pick. I think that's solid. I had them very close on my list to my next pick, but luckily I did not get sniped this time. I had the Suns way lower. But I'm just not a believer in them. I had them at 25. I'm probably just a hater. Yeah, I just think that situation is so catastrophic, and they're so dependent on those 3 guys, one of whom literally just cannot stay on the court at this point in his career in Beal, that I'm like, and he doesn't seem to even care that he can't stay on the court. I'm not gonna lie. Like there's just a part of every time I see a quote from him or whatever, I'm like, do you even like, does it
Yeah.
even bother you that you're getting paid like $60 million?
Maybe you get the old Brad back this year. I was like, yeah, it'd be nice for what we're paying you. But
Yeah, right.
I live across the street, so I'd like to see something.
Like for
That's
60 million.
vibes of DeAndre Ayton. I just want to make my second contract. That kind of energy.
Yeah.
That's a Suns player through and through.
Like for 60 million, I just would hope that he would feel a little bit of shame about barely playing. But whatever. Money is good, I guess. But I'm going to make another pick that's extremely similar to my last pick here. And it's just, in the spirit of the exercise, like who could I potentially see at this point winning a title in the next 5 years? There's only one other team, honestly, that I look at this list and I say, I could see it potentially happening, and only if everything breaks right. But like another one of these teams that has just barely enough flexibility that if you squint, you could be like, I could see some team making a deal with them for some of the young pieces that they have, plus whatever draft equity they can scrounge up. Although they are perpetually in cap hell, I think. Just looking, not as bad as they've been, but certainly not great this year. And I'm talking about the Golden State Warriors. So I'm going with them. Again, much like hard to totally bet against LeBron any given year, like hard to bet against Steph in any given year too. And they have had a championship more recently. And I think that there's a chance, maybe if like Kuminga and Moody take a jump this year and Pods takes a jump this year, that, suddenly you're looking at a team that feels very similar to that team that won a championship a few years back. But, even if not that, I think that they've got Wiggins, who's a big salary chunk, along with like those young guys that I mentioned that they might have. I mean, we saw they were very aggressive in their pursuit of like a Lauri Markkanen during this offseason. Like if those talks rekindle and they're able to secure him and then have a starting lineup of like Steph, Markkanen, Draymond, DeAnthony Melton, and like Kyle Anderson or Buddy Hield or whatever. I don't freaking know. I don't even know what their lineup would be at this point. But depending on how much they had to give up for, a guy of that caliber, maybe there's just enough star power there combined with having the greatest shooter of all time on your team still, who hasn't really missed a beat. And that's enough to win you another championship. So again, just sort of a dart throw on an old team that's probably over the hill, but in the back half of this thing where now it's just, other than maybe one other team you can make a case for, pretty much just crappy teams that you're hoping can somehow make it work here and get phenomenally better over the next few years. That's a team that has championship DNA, and it's kind of hard to ever fully rule out because they just kind of never die.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I'm going to make a case for, I think the one other team you're referencing, and that is the Miami Heat. I keep digging my hole deeper with Knicks fans, but I think the only real argument here is we just didn't get to see them healthy in the playoffs last year. Jimmy Butler showed up to media day with a normal haircut, which at this point in the draft is kind of enough for me. Like that's really all I need to see. If he like has like one more monster season in him, I do think Terry Rozier was like really balling out when they got him. I thought that was a good addition. That was another guy we just never got to see in the playoffs. And you know what? I'm betting on Eric Spoelstra, like best coach in the NBA, have him for the next 5 years, presumably, unless he gets burnt out and tries to dominate the NFL or something. Still some talent on that roster. I really like the Kel'el Ware pick. Bam is still pretty young. Hero, I'm not a fan of at all, but he's still young and maybe could get some kind of return from him in the future. This is not a team I was super excited to pick beyond my general Knicks loving disdain for them. But I think at this point in the draft, you just kind of have to bet on hashtag Heat culture. And then the next one, I was kind of torn because I sort of wanted you guys to take some of the teams ahead of me so I could jump ahead and do my crazy pick, which was going to be the Hornets, just because I'm a really big believer in Brandon Miller. I think he's going to be a star wing, and that's kind of the most valuable thing you could have in the NBA. But instead, I'm going to stay practical, and I'm going to maybe re-endear myself to Knicks fans by taking the Toronto Raptors. I think Scotty Barnes is good. I don't mind the contract for him at all. Like he's like a really interesting two-way piece to build around. Similar to Markkanen, he's a guy who ideally would be your third best player, not your best player. But big fan of his. Emmanuel Quickley, just a monster. I think he'll make an all-star team or two before it's all said and done. I can't say I'm a huge RJ Barrett believer, but he scored more efficiently and shot the ball better than I ever expected his first run in Toronto if he figures out on defense. And that's a front office that has done it before. And you know what? I love Dick. So that is my pick here. Marcus, where are you going next? Or no, it's Alex again. Alex, where are you going next?
Yeah, Marcus, do you have anything to add on those picks? Any
No, I
thoughts
think
on those?
what Gavin said is perfect. Clip that.
Well, you want to talk about not endearing yourself to Knicks fans? I'm about to really not do that. I'm gonna swoop on in and steal right out of your former Locked On Nets hosting potential picks here and just take the Nets. They're next on my list. I'm being very like, I don't do this on like my fantasy football draft or anything, but I'm like, you know what? I made a ranking and I'm sticking to it no matter what. And that's what I'm doing. So that's why I'm taking the Nets here. I've got them ahead of the likes of like the Clippers, the Pistons, the Blazers, teams like that. I think it's more just the fact that, again, this is a 5-year ranking. They have draft capital. This is a team that we've seen, as evidenced by 2019 and then everything that followed after that, for better or worse, extremely aggressive with trying to get better in a hurry. And maybe this is finally the time that Sean Marks gets it right. He's got essentially an unlimited runway from what it seems like. I assume the lifetime contract has already been inked at this point because no matter how catastrophic the failure, he's never going to, have to deal with being on the hot seat, apparently, because it seems like ownership just loves him unconditionally. So he's going to get room to cook. And, they now find themselves with obviously a lot of the Knicks picks, which I'm hoping don't turn into anything good, but they've got essentially control of the Knicks draft for a while now. Starting, let's see, 2025 is where it starts. So this year, along with Milwaukee's pick, along with OKC, Houston, or Phoenix's pick, depending on how that all shakes out. I mean, they've just got a lot of draft capital thanks to how they disassembled their team that they thought could be a championship contender, and maybe they just find some way to parlay that into making another pseudo championship contender. I don't know for sure if I buy it, but it's a team that has shown the willingness to try it. And in that case, with how quickly the NBA turns over, maybe 2 years, 3 years from now, the Nets are on the cusp of making some big free agent / trade splash again. And we find ourselves once again debating the merits of if they're going to be actual contenders or not. So that's why I took them there. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And here's the best part. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And I know football is in vogue. And Gavin, you make actually educated picks that you've thought about and stuff on this. I'm just going to be a homer, man. I'm just going to be like, look, there are some games in baseball right now. Both New York teams are in it. At this point, we'll be talking about game 4 of Mets Phillies. We're recording this a little ahead of time, so I can't see odds for that. But the Mets are +1.5 against the Phillies in game 3. Depending on how things go in game 3, maybe things change for game 4. The Yankees are going to be playing tonight when you're listening to this, and they are -1.5 against the Kansas City Royals. Whatever team you like, go bet on them. You know what? It gives you an extra thing to root for, gives you a little extra thing to be happy about. If Aaron Judge hits a home run or the Mets pull off another 8th or 9th inning comeback like they've been doing, it's something extra to root for. So, go place your $5 bet on that. Get yourself a little happiness, and then get $200 more to bet on your favorite New York teams again. Maybe bet on the Knicks to win the championship or something. That's a little better odds, a little bit better payout if you win out on that one. So if you want to do that, visit FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com.
Marcus, you devastated, or are you okay with that?
I'm fine with it.
I thought you were investing in this. That's okay. Go ahead.
Certainly not about anything on their roster right now. I'll make that abundantly clear. I'm just looking at how fast they try to accelerate timelines.
Yeah. I mean, I like Nick Claxton.
You're big Tariq Whitehead guy. Don't undersell it.
Yeah. And Josiah has shown that he's got at least finals DNA with the Liberty, so a quality owner, at least one that's willing to try things. I like the pick, Alex. I'm struggling looking at the board right now because I know I get 2 picks, but then after that, I'm just going to get whatever team is left over at 30th. So this is like really my last chance to like have some kind of agency in this draft. Man, and it is not good. Okay. I mean, there's teams I'm definitely not going to take. I'm going to take and I'm sorry to Knicks fans, I'm going to take the Hawks. Trae Young and all that, but I don't. Can I swear on this? You can.
No, but we'll bleep it out.
Yeah,
not anymore, buddy. This ain't your grandpa's.
What are they gonna do? Fire me?
Family friendly now.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'll take the Hawks. Just Trae Young's still a good player. They've got some other young talent on their team. No more DeJounte Murray, so at least that like unclogs thing a little bit for Trae. Maybe he can try to recapture what he had a few years ago in that Eastern Conference Finals run. And like you mentioned before, Alex, like the East is very top heavy. And so the Hawks are a team that I could see, like if Jalen Johnson hits, if Onyeka Okongwu hits, like maybe they end up as like a 6 seed or a 5 seed in like a surprise run this year. That wouldn't shock me too much. I think it would be disappointment if they weren't a play-in team at least. And yeah, that's not like anything to write home about, but I think that they have at least shown that they can make a little bit of a playoff run. Trae Young has shown that love him or hate him, he at least like will deliver in big moments. He's not the most fun to play with, it seems. They don't really play much defense or have anything of note on that end. But I think they're young enough and they have enough like overall talent that it's not the worst pick in the world. And then with my second pick, like I said, I don't have any agency after this, so I'm just going to talk out the 2 teams that I'm considering, which are the Hornets that you mentioned, Gav, and the Pistons. I think I'm going to take the Hornets. I still like LaMelo. I was seeing clips of him, driving around some screens against the Knicks in preseason. Looked good, looked healthy. The ankle was not turned yet. I know, Gav, you mentioned Brandon Miller earlier. He's definitely a nice piece. Yeah, I don't know. I don't love the team, but I think that they have had a lot of injuries the last year or two. And if LaMelo can like ever stay healthy for a full season, I do think he's really talented. He was an all-star. Like there's definitely something there. And worst case, I would think that if he came back and played a full season, like played 70 games and looked halfway decent, like he'd have an outside shot at an all-star spot in the East. He'd have an outside shot maybe at like a 3rd-team All-NBA now that it's positionless. I think he has that kind of ceiling. And I don't know, with the Pistons, it's like Cade and a lot of guys who are like, okay, they're very young. I don't mind Asar Thompson, Jalen Duran, but I think I'm going to go with the Hornets just because I think I like LaMelo a little more than Cade is kind of the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, I like what you did there. Alex, where are you going?
Well, first off, I'm glad that you saved me from having to take the Hornets because I'm just morally opposed to that team as a whole for who they decided to pay this offseason and give a giant contract to, given everything that we know.
A great point that I would have referenced had I done a little more prep.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So I'm glad that you have now laid down the groundwork for me to take a team that, honestly, I talked myself into the Hornets. I was about to break my list anyway, but now I get to go by the list and take the Pistons. I had them next. I just think it's so weird because you would think like that. To me, when I look at the amount of draft equity they've had and everything over the last number of years, it's so similar to the Magic. And it's just so funny to see how making those minute right decisions with drafting and with who you decide to hire within your organization as like coaches and GMs and everything else can make just all the difference. Like, because you could have all the assets in the world and just not put it together. And they're kind of in that spot right now. That said, I don't think that their roster is like trash or anything. I think that there's a lot of guys that are like fairly young that you can again squint your eyes and say like, I think there might be something here. Like Cade is still only 23 years old, and like, you know, they just inked him to a max contract, which I maybe think, I don't know if I would have necessarily done, but what more choice do you have? It's not like you're going to find someone else to spend that money on in the end. So I guess you kind of had to do that. But like, I like Oscar Thompson a lot. I think that he was grossly mismanaged last year by Monty Williams, and I don't think that'll be the case this year. So hoping that's not the case again. I like Isaiah Stewart. I think that he's a solid player, making like a fair amount of money. I don't know how to feel about getting like Tobias Harris on this team. I don't think that makes them that much better in the short term. But I still love like Jaden Ivey, taking a shot on Ron Holland. Like there's talent on this team, like, and Jalen Duren, who I didn't even bring up yet. Like there's talent. So I think if things start to work out, maybe they start talking, you know, working their way into like the play-in conversation this year. And maybe that's the building block to then make something else happen. The only problem is that they're just, I think I just want to double check this while I'm speaking it out here. They're pretty, I think, reliant just on their own draft capital.
Yeah.
I mean, they only have second rounders coming in from other teams. So and their first round pick, the protected pick that they had sent to the Knicks, is still in limbo now in possession of Minnesota after the Cat deal. So that sort of ties up their draft picks a little bit for a couple years until that conveys. So there's kind of, it's weird because they're clearly trying to get better, but there's also a great motivation for them to still be bad. And in that regard, they're a little confusing to look at over the terms of the next 5 years. But they're another one of those teams that, like, if they're just bad enough this year and just lucky enough finally with the lottery odds and get like Cooper Flagg or something, like Cooper Flagg, Cade Cunningham, Oscar Thompson, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, all these guys, maybe that's something to talk about in a year from now. And maybe that's a team that starts having like the Magic or Thunder at absolute best path at some point down the line.
Yeah, they've had just terrible lottery luck, so they're due for a win. I'm going to very reluctantly take the Los Angeles Clippers here as just like a team that it has unlimited money to spend, because that's the only thing going for them. Obviously, Kawhi is like, you're lucky to get half a season out of him at this point, and like as we go forward in time, like that's going to look worse and worse, and he's not going to be like someone who could just come off a major knee injury, a seemingly permanent major knee injury, and be one of the top 10 players in the league. Like, I don't know how much longer of a window there is for that, given like all those injuries piling up, but they should be, I don't know, 30 something win team this year. And the thing is, like, Ballmer is going to spend and spend and spend and spend and spend, right? Like they don't have any picks. They have no incentive to suck. Like, if I'm just taking with one of my last two picks, a team that's going to average 38 to 42 wins, like, that's not the end of the world. I'm not excited about it. There's no ceiling here, even compared to some of the teams below them that I think also don't have a ceiling, but I am going to take them. And then with my next one, I'm a little tempted to take the Bulls just because I think they're in a slightly better position right now than the Blazers and the Wizards. If Lonzo Ball, I think everyone's kind of rooting for this. Like, if he can make a miraculous comeback for what was a really tragic knee injury, because at the time he got hurt, they were playing pretty much as well as anyone in the NBA. They were first in the Eastern Conference. That infrastructure in there, no one really wants Zach LaVine. I just like look at their future and I get depressed. Like, I don't really buy into the Josh Giddey thing. I think he'll be fine. I just don't really see him ever being like efficient enough or good enough shooter to really lead a great offense. And I don't really know what the plan is there. So I'm going to take the Wizards, who I think are just going to suck for the first 3 years of this. So there's some downside in that. I think they are really, really content to be bad and kind of do what Oklahoma City did. And maybe that comes back to bite me. Maybe Chicago's winning 30 games every year and the Wizards are winning 20 games every year. But Sarr looked a little better in that first preseason game. I like Bub Carrington. Jordan Poole is fine until they turn him into something else down the road. And just like we keep saying with all these other teams, like, this draft is going to be incredible and they have as good of a chance at getting a top 5 pick in this draft as anyone else. And if that's like an all NBA franchise changing type of guy, maybe by years 3, 4, and 5, they're decent to pretty good. So I'm going to very reluctantly take the Wizards. I'm going to leave it to Alex for the last bit of agency in this draft, as Marcus put it, and we'll see who he ends up with after that.
Yeah, I'm going Blazers. I'm with you on the Bulls. You want to talk about like a rudderless, to shout out Woj, a real rudderless roster over there in Chicago. And I think that the big thing when we're talking about potential to get better over the course of the next 5 years is the fact that, like, you want teams to have flexibility, be it with contracts, draft picks, whatever, where like you can look at it. So like why I took the Spurs so high in addition to Wemby is like they just have flexibility. Like there's good contracts on that team. There's like tradable assets, there's draft picks, there's this, that, the other, there's like a little bit of everything. And that was the case of why I picked a couple of the teams on this, but the Bulls just have none of that. They're bad. And I think they've unfortunately been stubborn to a fault with this core to the point where now they've outlived the point where they can even blow this up. I think they're just stuck with it now. Like there was reports that they were just trying to give Zach LaVine away and could not. So yeah, I'll cease using my time to crap on the Bulls and leave that to Marcus when he's forced to pick them in a second. But I'll take the Blazers, who, I don't know if I necessarily buy them either. But again, it's like they have talent. They have Scoot Henderson, who hopefully will get better in year 2. They've got Anthony Simons, who you want to talk about routes to potentially blow it up if you want to and get some value in and start like a fresh rebuild. Like Simons, I think a lot of teams would line up for at like 25, 27 million over the next 2 years. Like that's a guy at 25 years old that I think a lot of teams would want for his shooting and his scoring ability and his passing and everything else that he offers. They have Jeremy Grant, who almost assuredly will be gone in that fashion at some point this year, I think. They'll probably trade him and find him a new home and finally make that move. You have Ayton, who had a pretty good back half of last year, but things are a little confusing considering they spent a high draft pick on Donovan Clingan. So who really knows there? But Shaden Sharp, has shown some real flashes, even if he can't stay healthy. Robert Williams, ditto, real flashes, can't stay healthy. Denny Avdia, there's already talk about like them saying
their
like,
best player, Alex. Their best
right,
player.
he might be our best player. Whatever. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, or if that is the case, that's kind of sad. But either way, a guy who I think they're probably just starting the process of trading him by the deadline early at this point and just trying to get the morale boost in there, start the sales pitch early. But yeah, I think they've got the ability to potentially sell like 3 or 4 pieces this year and get better and position themselves better. And then how they want to do that, how far they want to take the tear down to start building around like Scoot and Clingan and those guys. If it involves all the way down to getting rid of like Ayton and Simons and whatever, they have that option if they choose to. Or they can try to make it work with like Simons and Ayton and Scoot and those guys and just move a guy like Avdia and just start getting bits and pieces here and there and try to hope for some real luck in this year's draft. But they might just be like, again, a lotto luck and a Cooper Flag or an Ace Bailey or whatever away from potentially being a really good team again. So,
all right, Marcus, finish us off. Pool of sadness, 30th pick.
Yeah, I didn't want the Bulls. Also, just quickly, I forgot to mention with the Hawks pick that they have the number 1 pick in the draft.
I was going to say that's really. I meant to comment on it, and I forgot to comment on it. Richache, who is like so underhyped that you could reasonably not mention him and just be like, yeah, it's like maybe he'll make a difference. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be something. Just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, the Bulls were not the team that I wanted. I was excited about best player on the team, Denny Avdia. I was, fantasizing about Bilal Coulibaly, Cooper Flag, that duo with the Wizards. The Bulls just really clung on to that like half season stretch where Lonzo was healthy way too long. And to your point, Alex, like they're not able to give these guys away anymore. Like DeRozan, they sent off to the Kings. Like, what did they get back for him? I truly could not tell you. It's just like too late on all these guys. LaVine seemed like he was going to get traded to Philly for a while, and now they have Paul George, so there's no need for that. Like, I don't know. Maybe it is a team, like I mentioned earlier, like the Magic that need a guard, but you're just not going to get the value that you've gotten before, that you would have gotten before, and the Magic are like a team that has fleeced the Bulls very recently, so maybe you're hesitant to deal with them after the Vucevic, Wendell Carter, Franz Wagner trade. So I don't love this pick. They are a big city, like they're a major market. They're like a franchise that has a lot of history, obviously, with Jordan. The Giddey acquisition, you mentioned, Gavin, kind of a minor one, but you know how that works. They just don't really have a lot of talent on this roster. And what talent they do have is like at the end of its window. I've never really liked Patrick Williams that much. They paid him. He's still there. Kobe White, that's something. He looked good last year, like a belated breakout. So maybe you get a little Kobe White action. Maybe you find a team that needs some more playmaking or that just wants to shake things up. Like maybe the Lakers will take Zach LaVine. Maybe you can just like get rid of Vucevic. I think they still have.
Yes.
Maybe the Pelicans need him because they don't have a center. I don't know, but like less so because you're going to get stuff back, like Alex mentioned with the Blazers, and more so just to like not have these guys on the team anymore and to try to tank. Because those guys, like as much as I don't love them, they'll probably still get you to like 29 wins, 30 wins, which is maybe going to be too many if teams like the Pistons, the Blazers, the Nets, the Wizards are all like down in the low 20s, if that, for wins. So they're in a horrible spot. I don't have a lot of faith. I didn't want this. I didn't ask for this. So sorry.
All right, I'm going to put up the final tallies. Go vote on YouTube. We'll probably put something out on Twitter. I am not going to win, so good luck to you two. But this was a whole lot of fun, and Marcus, hopefully we'll have you back to do this in the future. Alex, we got a fun week ahead. One of our good friends from Knicks Film School coming on tomorrow. That's going to come out on Friday. Preseason wrap up to come, and we'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.